Let's get to our first conversation this Friday afternoon. Now, the Minister of State for Industry at the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, Senator John Enoh, has led a strategic tour of key industrial sites in Kaduna. He's also in Lagos presently to rejuvenate Nigeria's once thriving textile, cotton and garment industry. The tour, which forms part of the federal government's renewed commitment to industrial revitalization, aims to identify and resolve bottlenecks hindering the sector's growth, according to a statement made available to the media. Now, the delegation, according to the statement, visited the United Nigerian Textile Limited, a historic textile mill that once employed more than 10,000 workers. Emir of Kano and chairman of UNTL, His Royal Highness Sanusi Lamido, expressed deep concerns over the factory's cessation of operations in 2022. Citing economic constraints, he appealed to the federal government to address challenges such as unreliable power supply, infiltration of smuggled and dumped textile, a weak intellectual property protection, and limited institutional support for local procurement. Well, other issues, also the big one, the upcoming National Industrial Manpower Summit, NIMS, has also been on the forefront of the Honorable Minister. My guest live in Lagos studio is the Honorable Minister of State for Industry at the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, Senator John Enoh. Good afternoon, Senator. It's good to have you live in our Lagos studio.
Good afternoon, Tolu. I'm glad and I'm happy to be here. Brilliant studio, I dare say.
Thank you so much. It's good to get that from you, Honorable Minister. I think we should start with your movement, a week-long movement around the Nigerian textile corridors. Let's start with, what did you see and what does it mean for that once thriving textile industry?
Oh, well, I mean, it's been a multi-city, tour, that has had to do with, inspecting, industries. I mean, holding stakeholder conversations with the private-public development partners, investors and all of that. I mean, what did I see? I mean, I saw promise, I saw pains, and I saw prospects. And I think that, like you said, once thriving, I mean, I saw an industry that is yearning for attention in terms of revival. I saw industries that had once, engaged thousands and thousands of Nigerians, lying fallow with no activity, with no production. But again, I saw some promises here and there, a few that are still standing on and are still trying, to stay afloat and to continue to contribute to production. All of that. But above all, I think that I found people excited about the prospects of, revitalization, about some kind of confidence, about the fact that government was following up, not just, walking the talk, and all of that in terms of the kind of traction and the kind of movements that have occurred within the same sector in the last couple of months.
That's a really interesting one. Let's talk about the upcoming National Industrial Manpower Summit. I read a bit about it, but why now, and what transformation is this really expected to unlock?
It's from my appreciation of the upcoming, National Industrial Manpower Summit, who's, it's going to be between the 12th and the 14th of this month next week. First for me is the first, of its kind, national policy and technical dialogue, that brings to the fore the matter about Nigeria's manpower, development. The fact that, we can talk about infrastructure, we can talk about companies, we can talk about energy, but the human element you must talk about, because once you get this right, then you'll be able to now begin to tackle all the others. There is some kind of dissonance, between Nigeria's manpower needs in industry. Looking at industry's contribution to Nigeria's GDP, and that same industry's contribution in terms of Nigeria's workforce. It's discovered that the contribution of industry to Nigeria's workforce is less than about 18%. You can't compare this to what you have in the agri sector, which is about 38%, and what you have in the services sector, which is about 48%. So what it means is that in spite of the fact that you've got about 100 million, Nigerians that have work age, you don't find this employed in industry, in spite of the fact that industry continues to need more and more skilled labor, skilled manpower. So what it is that we don't have a fit-for-purpose industrial workforce. So the National Industrial Manpower Summit, comes in to try to attempt to, resolve the paradox, that the industrial paradox that exists. And the hope is that you are bringing together the private sector, the public sector, bringing together the academia that is responsible for the training, and you're hoping, for example, that getting this to national discourse and national conversation, that you're going to be able to force a discussion and some kind of, action that is going to be able to respond and to provide answers and a solution to this dissonance.
I'm specific about how this will be different from other summits that we've had before now. What mechanisms do you think will be put in place to ensure proper implementation, beyond declarations at this gathering?
First, I think that, this upcoming summit has the endorsement of Mr. President. That's an endorsement at the very highest level. In itself, it's a demonstration of, again, the leadership that this president continues to provide. The president has been very concerned from day one about, having the right skill set, for Nigerians. Because in itself, it's going to respond and to speak to quite a number of things. I mean, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area that is just, here with us. And I think that unless we have that kind of right-skilled workforce, right-skilled manpower development skill set, I think that we won't even be able to export our skill set to neighboring other countries. But so it has that kind of endorsement at the very highest level. And, the president's engagement and interaction with the ITF, for example, the president more or less had given ITF a marching order in terms of the number of Nigerians that must be trained, which is why in the ITF we talked about the super, skills training that is going on. And I think that you also find out that for the first time, the kind of interest that this has generated amongst Nigerians, the fact that you're looking at a certain number and the people who have been declaring interest in terms of having to come. But above all, the idea is that this National Industrial Manpower Summit benefits from a lot of the work that has been done in the past. For example, in 2016, the Industrial Training Fund, partnering with UNIDO, had done a study of the national skills gap. So the Manpower Summit that is coming up, in itself is targeted, trying to respond to most of those issues that were thrown up by the various studies, that evaluations that have taken place. So you're not just doing a summit on its own that is not based on anything. You're doing a summit that attempts to answer to the national skills gap that has been discovered. So you're going to find what? You're going to find that at the end of the day, you're going to have a skill, some kind of fit-for-purpose workforce that is targeted at what? Trying to make sure that you target about 10 various subsets of the manufacturing sector and try to train the workforce and all of that. You're going to find out that one of the things that is targeted is that we have what we call technology, engineering, and innovation, training. And the idea is to try to say how you can match this, the outcome of this, to having to speak to making sure that you are inviting the academia to the same room and hoping that looking at the kind of, trying to consolidate all the various agencies and players that are in this space. You're talking about ITF, talking about, SMIDAN, talking about all of these, whose main concern is actually the kind of workforce that we're able to have.
Interesting. So I've followed your Industrial Revolution work group since inauguration, I must say. Brilliant stuff, Honorable Minister. But really, how far have you gone? I know there's been meetings upon meetings. The last time I spoke to DG of Man, he was at the meeting in Abuja the last time he joined my program. But can you take us through measurable progress that has been made in recent times around that working?
Okay, let me just say this. One of the last sessions of the Industrial Revolution work group that we had was a technical session. Okay. It took place here in Lagos, about 3 weeks, a month ago. And at the moment, one of the things that we've tried to do is that we've put together what we call a note to the Federal Executive Council, informing the Federal Executive Council about the outcome of the technical sessions. But above all, these technical sessions dwelt on 5 thematic areas. A lot of the concerns of industry we actually tackled one by one at that 2-day session. So one of the things we'd like to do is that in the next couple of weeks, I'm inaugurating what I call ministerial roundtable that is going to tackle each of the thematic areas. For example, if you're looking at affordable long-term finance and incentives, we're going to bring a roundtable, is going to bring together all the players and the relevant people in this thematic area in the same, to the same room. I mean, the Bank of Industry, the CBN, all those that should play roles to try to make sure that this is solved. And hoping that at the end of a particular roundtable, immediate and instant solutions are going to be able to be achieved. If you move to, for example, power, energy, infrastructure, bringing together all those who play in that space, talking about even the industrial training is one of the thematic areas. So the idea is that in each of the roundtable discussions that is going to be, is going to happen, that immediate and instant solutions are going to be brought in, are going to be addressed. If you're looking at, for example, one-stop shop thing. If you're looking at, for example, manufacturers have been crying for several years about the fact that they would like to be categorized as those that should get gas in terms of affordable pricing. And you're bringing the various gas companies and into that same room. We're going to be able to deal with this. So there's a lot of traction that we're getting already. And even part of the multi-city trips that I've made to Kaduna, to Lagos and all that are all related to the outcomes of the discussions of the Industrial Revolution Work Group.
Interesting. Now, in your view, I really like to be practical about this, but what does it take, or what do you think what will it take for Nigeria to finally convert its industrial potential into measurable productivity?
Well, it's going to require the continuous leadership of Mr. President, whose Agenda 7, speaks toward accelerating diversification. It's going to speak to that. It's going to speak to, not just about, okay, I talk about the textile sector.
Yes.
Now, last month, the National Economic Council took a decision that that a CTT board should be constituted. This is happening at the very highest level of our leadership. Last week, the Secretary of Government of the Federation talked about government's commitment to revitalize the textile sector, right? And I followed up with these trips around. So it's going to take a convergence of that right leadership that the public sector can provide, the private sector players as well. It's going to take, we need to continue to realize the fact that Nigeria is not going to be able to attain the kind of development, the kind of economic growth that it aspires to unless it gets its manufacturing industrial base right. Countries, incidentally, that are the most industrialized are also countries that are regarded as economically developed and advanced. So it's going to take a lot of that. It's going to take, government continuing to provide support in terms of what the BOI is doing. Incidentally, everywhere I've visited, I have received a lot of commendation from manufacturing concerns about what role the BOI has played, in terms of their existence and their operations. So it's going to require the BOI to continue to do what it's doing. It's going to require government's continuous intervention. At the beginning of this administration, the president had actually done an intervention for manufacturers and for MSMEs. It's going to continue to require that. When the 2025 budget was being passed, there was a 500 billion additional funding for the BOI. It's going to continue to need a lot of that. Just about last week, there was an approval for the Bank of Agriculture, to be able to access about 1.5 trillion that was, promised that bank and all of that. So it's going to require a lot of those efforts coming together. It's going to require the private sector to continue to do what it's doing. Our RISE, working with the Ogun State government, is starting an industrial, park somewhere in Ogun State. So it's not just going to require one industrial, textile. It's going to require one in Lagos, one in Kaduna, one is, scattered all around. It's going to require the kind of National Industrial Manpower Summit that is taking place next week because as we develop and get our industry right, the kinds of skills for industry are also going to require upgrading. Yes. It's going to need a lot of those. It's going to need, at the moment, we are finalizing work in terms of the National Industrial Policy, which has been, in the background for several years and all of that. The hope is that before the end of this year, Nigeria is going to have a new national industrial policy, and that policy is going to have a right mix of the kinds of things that need to be done to get industry right. and manufacturing.
I want to ask like a follow-up, that do we have some timelines for some of this? Because when we look at all of this, yes, looks pretty, but when we said that, do we have a bit of timeline to achieving 1, 2, 3 as we move on? I know you're doing a lot, and you could also highlight on some other things. The automotive industry, I see all the efforts of your ministry, what you've been doing around that space. But do we have some timelines for achieving some of these set goals?
Well, okay, I've just talked about the national industrial policy.
Yes.
And I've said that before the end of this month, for example, we're going to have a new national industrial policy.
Good.
Right? Work is going on, right? You're talking about the automotive sector. Incidentally, it's also a sector that remains quite critical. You know, fortunately, with Mr. President's announcement of Nigeria First policy, we're trying to see how we can get, can bend backwards and try to get things to happen. And the hope is that the signaling is important. And I find a lot of my colleagues and people in the public sector, making requests and trying to find information about Nigerian assembled cars and all of that. So those things are taking place. And as we continue to walk the talk, I mean, these things are going to be realizable. I mean, before, distant time. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not going to be as specific as saying tomorrow, next week, and all of that. But I need to assure you that government is showing enough commitment and that would following it. And I think that we are more concerned about the outcomes. I mean, Nigerians have become tired of all the talk that government continues to talk. So we're looking at outcomes that are measurable, and we're working to make sure that we achieve all of them.
Brilliant. If you had one message for Nigeria's manufacturing community, because I speak to them a lot and listen to their challenges, and of course they want to be competitive. You talked about the AFCFTA, which are supposed to play big in. What would you have to tell them at this time, Honorable Minister?
Well, what it is that, I mean, they're doing a yeoman's job. I mean, and I commend quite a number of them. I mean, it's not stories of all woes. I mean, yesterday, I walked into a textile factory that is operating. I walked into a textile factory that was very confident that because of their efficient, procedures, they're able to keep costs low, they're able to produce, and they're able to sell at cost or prices that are lower than, those coming from India and China and such countries. Okay. I mean, we have stories like that. So my message is government commitment is on, you cannot doubt. Government is committed to the development of this sector, but government won't do all. The private players have to do what they can do to continue to lead in production and in manufacturing. A lot of their concerns are being listened to. You have a government that is listening, and that's why I've been in the field, not just looking at the factories, but wherever I've gone to, I've organized a stakeholders session. We have had engagement and interactions with the private people and the private sector.
How receptive are they? I
mean, very, very. And they appreciate the fact that this hasn't happened before. I mean, a particular president of a particular association, long-standing, walked up to me at the end of today's session and said, it's the first time that he's had this kind of invitation. It's the first time he's sitting with a minister and he's having lunch. It's the first time he's having to have quite some personal deep discussions on this sector with the minister in charge of this. So all of this is to give confidence to all of them about the fact that what they are doing, government appreciates. They are not alone. Government is going to be taking and responding to the concerns that they have because they need to be protected. I mean, in terms of the policies that government comes with, in terms of the things that they need, government will continue to provide support because government knows that if there is one thing that this country needs to achieve, is production, and is production.
Indeed. I wish you a great one again with the National Industrial Manpower Summit. Maybe last word on that before we wrap this up.
Yes, I mean, it's, the hope is that one of the outcomes of that summit is going to be that we're going to have, Nigerians, the youth especially, are targeted here. We're going to be able to have, a combination of skill sets amongst them that's going to make them fit for industry and fit for employment. I mean, we're going to sit with the academia and try to make sure that the curriculum that they design is such that there is a connection between, the academia and work and industry. not just producing graduates in terms of, for the sake of producing graduates, but graduates that are employable. We're going through periods of underemployment. We found out that in industry and in manufacturing, the kinds of jobs that Nigerians play are low-level jobs and all of that. The National Industrial Manpower Summit brings this to the fore and hopes that at the end of the day, Nigerians are not just going to have low-paying jobs, but are going to have skilled jobs that are going to make them productive and make contributions to the growth of our national economy.
I must thank you so much, Senator John Enoh, as the Honorable Minister of State for Industry at the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. Thank you so much for coming to the studio. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Tola. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, then. Well,